The views, information, and opinions expressed during the following program are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent the views of Access Communications, its representatives, or its employees.
The RCMP Heritage Centre is a not-for-profit charitable organisation mandated to share the story of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. This is one of those stories, part of your heritage.
I was transferred out of Regina to Uranium City. Now, I was actually looking forward to that. But by the time they did that, Uranium City was starting to slow down. And they were talking about it was going to be downgraded from a staff sergeant to a sergeant's position, fewer, and I was still, by this time, I was still almost 10 years service. I was a constable going into a detachment where I would have been probably junior in service, because everybody had 15, 16 years service. So somebody decided to offer me a position at depot because of a vacancy that happened in February. And so the staffing officer calls me up and he says, well, we know we've got you on paper for Uranium City, but depot is opening up and it could be a corporal's position. So I had to really think about that. It took about probably 2.5 seconds where I said, yeah, depot sounds like a pretty good deal. So I went to depot for 3 years, teaching driver training, and which is interesting for a guy from the East, but 3 years there, traffic law enforcement, and I learned that I really enjoyed teaching. So that became part of a theme in my career as well. At division training and then eventually at the Canadian Police College. Out of depot, when it came time to move out of depot, I decided I probably wouldn't mind trying something new. So I'm talking about headquarters and about different levels of training, maybe commercial crime and that kind of stuff. So I ended up being transferred to Interpol, and I had no idea what that meant. I had read a few books where, the Interpol agent was out to save the world, and I thought, well, maybe that'd be a good thing to try. It was a section at the time, it was a staff sergeant in charge. But I ended up going to Paris for the training session. I came back as part of the Central Bureau for Interpol and got involved in all kinds of interesting deals. It was more administrative than anything else because we were kind of the conduit. We were the traffic cops. A request would come from the Canadian Police Agency about something, an individual from India or South Africa, and we would simply send the request on their behalf for investigation. They would return it, we'd send it back, and vice versa. So, but while I was there, I was looking through some of the file cabinets, and there's a whole row, 4 or 5 cabinets. They were full of notices for stolen artworks. Now, the way Interpol works is that they've got notices about everything. Blue notice for missing person, green notice for wanted person, and then these notices about thefts of works of art. And nobody was doing really anything with that. And I asked the staff sergeant, what's this all about? He said, oh, when we get it from Interpol, we'll send it to where we think it would be best, maybe to the Glenbow Institute or the Museum of Canada, but we don't really do that much about it. And so I started working on that and trying to figure out what would be the best way to deal with it, talking to people, at the National Art Gallery, at the Glenbow Institute, and then I found out that there was an international Federation of Art Research, so I got in touch with them, which led me to the U.S. So I put a package together, and I was going to ask that we create a Works of Art section in Ottawa. And I had to make the presentation in front of the chief superintendent at the time. So I got all my stuff together, and I went in front of him, and he said, "You got 10 minutes." So away I went, but my material was way more than 10 minutes. Because I was really sold on this, you know, all kinds of thefts that occurred. So I'm going a mile a minute, and 10 minutes are up, and he slams the desk, and he said, "You're done." I said, "But no, I'm not." He says, "Yes, you are. I got another appointment. You're done. Next time you come, get better prepared." So I was kind of disappointed about that, but, you know, being a young corporal, and there's the chief saying, "You're done," well, I'm done. So I had to go down and revamp my presentation, but eventually I sold them on it, and they created the first Works of Art section in Canada, and we would ship the information back and forth, and even attend some of the art dealers association and improve that process. So that's one of my little creations that I was proud of. Was the Works of Art section. Time came up, at that time they were looking for somebody at the Canadian Police College, and they asked me if I was interested. It was a sergeant's position, and of course I was as ambitious as anybody. So I went to the Canadian Police College, working on investigative technique, and we would give training to different police forces in Canada. And as I said before, training and standing in front of people, I would scare the heck out of me. I would get up the first day of a course, and I would just about be sick. And I convinced myself, I got to walk away from this. It's going to make me. But the minute that I would get in class and start going, then it would kind of dissipate, and then I was fine. Did that for 3 years. By that time, the force had decided that parenting was a bit biased for guys going to the commission rank, and maybe people could self-identify. And I said, well, if it's the first time in the force, I might as well do that. So I did. I self-identified, went in front of the board, and I was successful. So I went on to the list. But I kept saying to myself, now, the last thing I want is to go back to Montreal. I'd love to get a commission and go back to the field. So the phone rings, and officer staffing, "You're still interested in the commission?" I said, "Well, yeah, of course. Where do you want to send me?" He said, no, all we're interested in is, are you interested in the commission? And I said, yes. He says, thank you. Hang up. So about a month later, a list came out, said, you're going to Montreal. So I ended up as Division Intelligence Officer. And that's kind of an oxymoron, you know, an intelligence officer. But it was an interesting way to get back into federal policing at the time. We were doing mostly organized crime. And my earlier time on surveillance wasn't lost, because these guys were still around. They were the same actors, were still part of the Vic Catroni families, the Bonanno families, but they were on the edge of their fall. And I was at an advantage because I knew most of them. I replaced a guy from my hometown. Al Michaud was the DIO at the time, and so we would make a joke about it, that to be a DIO, your first name had to be Al, and you had to be from Grand Falls, New Brunswick. So I went in there. We worked in Quebec for a year and a half, officer staffing came around in about that time, and anybody want to talk to officer staffing? I said, yeah, I wouldn't mind. So I went in, and things had changed in Montreal by that time. My wife is English speaking. We were living in Montreal, but she couldn't get a job. And this is the dilemma that we had in those days, is that the wife pretty well had to give up her career aspirations because you were up and gone here on a whim. So I was telling officer staffing that I wouldn't mind eventually getting into a contract division. And so at this time we were doing the Shamrock Conference in Quebec City. We had Ronald Reagan down up from the United States, and Brian Mulrooney singing Irish, the Irish Highs in Montreal. Now we're in Quebec City. We finished that particular job, and the phone rings, and they say, there's a transfer coming your way. How do you feel about going to Calgary? Because the '88 Olympics are coming up. You've got background with Expo 67. What do you think? I said, I'll be ready at 12 noon tomorrow. So I called my wife from Quebec City, and I said, I got some bad news. I said, we're transferred. And she says, where? I said, Calgary. And the scream on the phone was enough to tell me that she was pretty happy about that. So off we go to Calgary. And again, now I'm getting back into contract policing, but I was a contract policing officer as a constable, and now I'm going back as an officer. Glorified section NCO is what I was doing. I was a line officer for Calgary East. But it was a great job. And that's the thing about the force. I 34 years of RCMP, and I don't think I'd give up any part of it, except maybe writing the letters to the 14-year-olds. In Calgary, I got in there, and I had from Calgary to the Saskatchewan border, and so it included Brooks and Gleason Reserve and up in Hanna and those places. And I got right into it, enjoyed it, and by that, and then we were also preparing for the '80 Olympics. So I was given the Nordic Center in Canmore as my venue for the upcoming Olympics. But at the same time, I was a line officer, and I had to do my inspections and respond to, I think I responded to 2 prison riots when I was there. And we had, I think, probably 12, 14 murders. And it was all part of the game. Days off was whenever you could sneak one in, and your hours were from the time you got up at 5:36, get to the office by 7, so you know what's going on, and maybe get home for supper around 7:30 at night, and never minded. In the meantime, my daughter was in her 3rd high school in this, because when I was commissioned, she was just going into grade 9 in Ottawa. She did her grade 10 in Quebec, and her grade 11 at William Eberhart in Calgary. So that's quite a disruption in the family, although she, to this day, she keeps telling me she didn't mind. But it makes it hard to make friends for them. We've got a built-in family. We arrived, we're members of the force. We knew half of the guys that were there because we were in training with them. But for them, it was being displaced and taken out of their comfort zones more often than not. The '80 Olympics was I think that was a highlight of a career, really. It was the pomp, the success of the games, and the contacts that you made and enjoyed. And it led me to my next move, because by March of '88, the Olympics were, or getting into '89 really, the Olympics were over, and they said, how would you like to get your own command, go to Moncton. And so for the first time since leaving home, I was going back, technically going back home to Moncton. I spent 6 years in Moncton, and being an OC is really a highlight of anybody's career. I think it's even better than CO, and maybe I'm saying that because I didn't become a CO, but as an OC, I spent 6 years at it, and I absolutely loved being in charge of that southeast corner of New Brunswick. The people are warm but they're volatile. We have between the fishermen, the bikers, and the problems in the bush. It kept you busy, and if I wanted a day off in those days, I would have to tell the staff sergeant, "You're acting OC for the weekend," and literally get in my car and drive out of Moncton. We handled, I think it was 33 murders in the time frame that I was there, and only one is unresolved. It's not that we don't know who did it, we just can't find him. So we figure that he probably went for a swim in the Atlantic, because we never saw him again. From New Brunswick, I came back to Ottawa. I came back in A Division as in charge of protective operations, looking after Parliament Hill, the precinct, Governor General's residence, the Prime Minister's residence, 127 embassies. And that really is, if you have to be a real PR man to keep everybody balanced and quasi-happy. I really enjoyed that. That was a lot of fun. Went from that to crops officer. And finally went to study the whole emergency preparedness of the force. So in the last 2 years of my service, that's pretty well, we traveled across the country to rewrite the policy on emergency response to major events, major crime, and to prepare the force in the direction. So that was kind of fun because we covered almost every part of the country. And then in '99, I thought, that's time for me to go. And I retired with 34 years service. When I retired, I joined the vets, pretty well right out of the office. I'm not one to sit around too much. At the same time, I moved from my house to a condo downtown. I ended up on the Condo Association as a president, and I joined the executive of the division, the Veterans Division here in Ottawa, eventually becoming the president of the division for about 5 years. I think the Vets Association is, we can do a lot to help our members and to protect their pensions and their rights. We look after their widows, we visit them when they're sick, and we stay connected. Because when the time that I signed on that line on the 2nd of July, 1965, I joined the family, and it looks like until death do us part. It's almost a marriage. Because once you get into the vets, and then you see everything that the guys are going through, and you're getting stories, like sitting down with Bill Kelly, talking about the war years, and he was one of our veterans, so we go visited him. It gave us pleasure, it gave him pleasure. So we were family looking after a family. By the time that I'd done 5 years with the veterans, I thought, well, maybe I should look at the National Board of Directors. And I put my name into it and got elected as a director. President said, well, there's a few things that you could do. You're in Ottawa, so you could probably look after the National Operations Committee, because a lot of the issues that you would deal with, pensions, pension benefits, insurance benefits, all of that, you know, it's easier to deal with headquarters and everybody that's there. And he says another thing that is the quarterly needs a chair person. You don't have to do much. You're just the chair of the board of trustees. You know, it's like everything else that we do in the force. You get sent to a job, and that's kind of the beauty of the force. There's so much variety. They provide you with the training in the force, and you move from federal policing to provincial policing to municipal policing to finance and everything else. So you can go through everybody can go through the force, and everybody comes out with a different experience. And that's what happened with me. And that's what happens with the vets as well, except there's no training. You learn by doing. And so I went in and I said the quarterly, I thought that was an RCMP publication. And it is. I mean, it was created in 1933, and the originals were it was a blue binder with very few pictures, black and white, and it was stories about what different guys had done. But basically, it was a gossip column. It was telling guys who had been promoted, who had passed away, who got married, who had children. And that's how you kept in touch with your troop mates. And it developed as it went. By 1999, the force was being pushed financially. They had to do some cuts. They had to realign and justify their expenditures. And of course, things that got put on the cutting block was the band and the quarterly and God knows what else. So the quarterly, the vets at the time, Al Burchell and a few other guys, they said, no, we can't let that go. This is our history. Since 1933, we have been telling stories about the successes of our members and their lives. And we had funny stories and cartoons and obits, but we thought it was necessary. So the vets said to the commissioner of the day, Phil Murray, look, let's put a business case together and see if the vets can't produce this magazine. But we need your help. We need an office. We need some computers. We need this. We need that. And we'll take it over. We'll actually borrow money, which was kind of a risky thing, to publish it. So our first edition was January, the winter issue of the quarterly under the vets was in year 2000. So we've been at it since 2000 to now, and we still do the same service. We try as much as possible, and for me, I never published a magazine, didn't even, and all of a sudden I had to write an editorial from time to time, which takes me a long time to do. And we have to do it to meet the needs of serving members, retired members, French-speaking members, English-speaking members, make sure that our facts are straight, and do it on a shoestring. We have paid people, we have an editor, and a clerk. And the rest of us are freebies. There's 5 of us on the board of trustees. Technically, we're the owners of the quarterly. It's at arm's length from the Vets Association. The Vets Association cannot tell the quarterly what to do or how to do it. And they don't. And if the quarterly decides that there's a profit at the end of the year, It's written in our board of our trustee document that we decide where it's going to go and who it's going to go to. And we try to carry on the tradition from 1933 on. We've added color. Personally, I think we do a heck of a good job. I mean, it is a good magazine. We try to involve everybody. So we have associate editors from the different divisions. So we ask the divisions, now you're in charge of giving us the gossip. Who got married? Who did this? It's not a GOs. We don't tell guys that we're charged. And then we get interesting stories from the different divisions. Humorous stories, but success stories as well. So we have the division dispatches, plus we ask people of different walks of life to tell us a story, and we publish it. So we're still above water. We have to scramble sometimes with Heritage Canada and they give us a grant because we published a bilingual publication. And it is our intent, as long as we can, to carry that tradition of reporting our history. We record it. And that's why I approached Heritage. I went to Heritage for the simple reason we are doing the same job. We're preserving what's going on. So where we are short on stories, we are hoping that Heritage will provide us, will fill in the blanks. And at the same time, we can promote the heritage because that's one of our jobs. The vets are actually doing a really good job in preserving the history of the force.